Welcome, everybody. Hope everybody's having a good day. For this meeting, our sponsors are, for the food, is paid by our annual conference, LASCON, and facilities for National Instruments is graciously able to provide this space for us. Just one mention about LASCON, the call for papers is now open. It's cfp.lascon.org. And also the early bird tickets are available. So if you want to get the good pricing, you can go ahead and register. Chapter leadership. I'm Tiana Chandler, the chapter leader, and we have some others here who are on the chapter leadership. And just raise your hands if you're here, and if there's anybody that, if you have any questions, you can ask any one of us. For CPEs, you can get an hour credit for this, and for now, the way I have it set up is if you could just email me if you're interested in getting a certificate, I can send that to you. Chapter information. For memberships, you do not have to be a member to attend this meeting, but it is helpful for supporting the community and the organization. So you can also go to austin@owasp.org to find out more information about that. Other ways of supporting OWASP, volunteer opportunities. We're always looking for additional help, either if you're interested in being involved with the leadership of of Austin chapter. If you're wanting to speak, you could talk to Kate Brew about speaking opportunities. And then we attempt to have some other local events as we can. If you do any purchasing through Amazon, there's the Amazon Smile program they have, and you can designate OWASP, and then there's a percentage that goes to the OWASP Foundation. And also we're a 501c3 organization. We have a study group going on right now. It's the Black Hat Python book. Matt Pardo, who's our education coordinator, runs that. Matt, did you have anything you wanted to mention? Okay, and the communication we have is through a Slack channel. So if you want to join in that chat, then yes. Thank you, Matt. Conferences, other than LASCON, it's later on, but a more recent conference coming up is B-Sides Austin. Registration, I believe, is still open, Matt? Right, so if you're interested, you might want to try to sign up as soon as possible. Upcoming chapter events, Matt just ran off, but Matt is looking at some other potential training opportunities for us to have, and so he's still looking more at that, so just stay tuned for that. Also, the Austin Security Professionals Happy Hour, which is a joint OWASP-ISSA. The next one we're going to have is actually on May 3rd to coincide with B-Sides. And I haven't 100% confirmed this, but we couldn't get Sherlock, so we're looking at Mr. Trance, which is just right down the road. It's a bar there that has a big room, and so I will email if that changes, but for now I believe that's what it's going to be. I don't think Matt Snyder is here, is he? No, maybe not. You wanted to talk about something? Sort of, okay. Other upcoming events, I have some dates here that are from their websites. So if you're interested in these other local events, visit their websites. Also, I'd like to take a time now for any job opportunities for anybody that is looking to hire. I'd like to open that up now for anybody that has announcements. No? Okay. And now to introduce John McLeod, the CISO of Alien Vault, as our presenter.
All right, thank you guys very much. Excuse the voice. I'm still trying to get used to Austin pollen, that is. I spent the last 10 years in Houston, so I just got over the pollen down in Houston, and now I'm just trying to get used to this cedar stuff in the hill country here. So I'm the CISO at Alien Vault, but of course, before I get started, and like any other presentation you've probably seen, there's some disclaimers here. My opinions are mine. I don't represent the company in my opinions. However, some of those opinions could align themselves. Who am I? So, like I said, I spent the last 10 years in Houston. I was with Halliburton and National Varco down there, so big oil, but always in IT security, some sort of job, some form or fashion. And in the oil business, they just now are starting this concept of the CISO. So it's in the old world, it's usually like a manager or a director. That's the lead security person. So CISO is just a title, but it's the lead security person. We'll get into that in a minute. I've been an incident responder for Mandiant at the height of the Google hacks. Been at Guidance Software, if you're familiar with some forensic, digital forensic stuff. And then before all of that, I was in the Air Force for 20 years as a computer crime investigator. Anybody want to take a stab at what my first computer was? I heard Commodore VIC-20. Who was that? Very good, very good. So in I don't even remember the year, late 70s, early 80s. My dad was a school teacher, and of course didn't make much money. But during the summers, he would do some electrical work to subsidize his income. Well, during one job, he brings home this thing that you see up there, and it's a Commodore VIC-20, and it has a tape drive, cassette tape drive. And I remember waiting 3 minutes just to play Hangman. So, anyways, I was a kid then. So I always like starting out with all my presentations that talk about the latest hacks. And the very first one that Mandiant in their report kind of emphasized was attackers are now calling their victims. And I'll give you a really good example of what happened down in Houston a good 10 years ago, but they're actually now calling these individuals. So one of my first engagements as a Mandiant consultant was for a big mega church down in Houston. Not going to name the name. And the attacker knew that they can win the hearts and minds of somebody just by sending a quick email that said, hey, I'm so-and-so, I'm the deacon at this big mega church. I'm stuck in London. Can you please just send $100? Now, what happens at a big mega church? You're talking 50,000 people, right? So 50,000 times $100, that's a lot of money that gets sent over. And because it's a church and because your heart was kind of tugged on, a lot of people donated more than $100 to help this poor guy out get back from London. And the money actually went to Nigeria, not to some guy stuck in London. Well, fast forward 10 years, the same church got hit again, but telephone calls this time. And they fell for it again. So attackers are just getting a little bit more bold by making these telephone calls, going from email in. So if you're in any way connected to the U.S. government, like I was, and probably even now to this day, you were affected by the OPM hack. So all your personal information, China has. And more than likely, China is probably selling that to Russia or some of these other nation states out there. So PII is really big right now with the nation states. it can help them in some geopolitical issues that they might need to strong-arm somebody with. So the more information they have on you, depending on what their agenda is, the better for them, whether it's negotiating contract prices or negotiating some sort of a territorial dispute or whatever the case might be. The cool thing that Mandiant evaluated, this is of course with their customers, and I got some stuff here with CrowdStrike, is the time to detect an incident went down. So it's no longer from years ago where it was over a year to detect that the bad guys were in your network. It's now down to about, 99 days? That's still a little bit too long, obviously. So CrowdStrike, this past RSA conference, if you had a chance, they did a phenomenal talk and some demos, and it's actually on the RSA website if you want to watch their video, but they highlighted these different hacks that you see at CrowdStrike. And the one particular one that I like seeing is the malware-free intrusions. Whenever we talk about evil in a network, and whenever we talk about China, or maybe even, I don't know, the Nigerians run around in our network, we're always thinking malware this, malware that. And of course, you do need defense in depth, and you need antivirus, and you need, host-based intrusion detection. But guess what? Now we're in this age of malware-free intrusions, whether it's a script, PowerShell script, or maybe even something other that just lives in memory. So attackers are getting a little bit more sophisticated. I love this flashpoint slide right here, and if you can see it, yeah, you should be able to. It's kind of cool, actually. So just pick your vertical, then you can pick your bad guy that's targeting your vertical. But now, what I want to kind of highlight here is from disruptive on down. So the disruptive, the cyber criminals, the hacktivists. What I noticed over my years of looking into these investigations is what happens is these guys will come, I say guys, a lot of times it's teenagers. I can't tell you how many times while I was in the Air Force, we would go to the French gendarmerie talking about some hacker, and you're thinking, oh my God, it's some 30-year-old guy, trying to hack. No, these are like 17-year-old kids that got into the military network. So when we're talking about cyber criminals, but they can do some damage. And what happens is they'll get into a situation and they get bored. You can almost see that in the sniff that we do, or we sniff some packets, obviously. You can almost see that in the transcript that they kind of get bored, and then they start doing destructive techniques. So that's why I want to kind of point out these last few here. In jihadists, obviously, they just want to, disrupt anything. But it's that disruption that I think that we're going to be seeing over the next 10 years that's going to increase, which is actually going to be kind of cool for us because we're in computer security. But here's the matter of fact, the state of the hack. You're always going to have that one person in your organization that's going to click on everything. And I mean everything. And every security department and every company can tell you the individual's name. That's how we know this. We call them at National Welvarco VIPs, very incident prone. So that's what we call them. And if you can't read at the bottom, it says, IT says I should change my password now. Yeah. Anyways, so getting back to the what's a CISO and the CISO playbook. Yeah, this is a lot of words by Wikipedia, but the bottom line is a CISO is the lead person in an organization. A CISO is just a title, but it's the lead person, security person in that organization. Like I said, in oil and gas, there's some great lead people. They're senior managers or something like that, or they could be directors. So it's just a title. Basically, that's all what it is. Lots of great professionals out there. So what do they do? What's a CISO do? Well, we do a lot, and I don't expect you to read this slide either, but just know that you kind of got to know if you're familiar with the CISP, 10 domains. It may have changed by now. I don't know. But you kind of got to know a little bit about everything and kind of a master of a few. So that's basically what a CISO mind map is all about, or what we do. But essentially, and ultimately, it boils down to 4 focus areas. But I want to actually kind of hone in on that last one right there. Every single company is different, obviously. Every single IT department is different, obviously. And every single IT security department is different. But for some odd reason, vendors out there love metrics like how much percent is IT security spend against IT and all this other crap. Well, what I mean by all of this is, from a CISO perspective, these metrics are terrible. They're absolutely terrible because your company is different from mine. Your IT department's different from mine, and your IT security department's different from mine. So what that means is I need to find the right balance between security controls, whether it's technical, administrative, okay, or even operational controls, with our culture. That's my job. That's what I need to try and do. But when I have vendors shoving down metrics to my board or to my leadership, and then they start asking questions, it just derails me. I go into these rabbit holes that I got to go answer, and then come to find out that, I already knew what I already knew at the very beginning. So anyways, it's just a balance. Yes, the mind map is exhausting, and I can't tell you how much I sleep at night. Actually, I do sleep, but this was a pretty cool slide I stole from another CISO. I wish I had the reference there for you. But it seems like a lot is their roadmap. Absolutely. So Chris, and I'll probably mispronounce his name, Padron, from the city of Portland, created this really cool map. It's all based off the NIST cybersecurity framework. And I don't expect you to study this in detail or anything like that. And if you're interested in the slides, I'm more than happy to give them to you, or contact the OWASP chapter here and they can give them to you. There's no proprietary information in this. But it's a really cool map because guess what CISOs hate doing? CISOs hate reinventing the wheel. Every once in a while, there's a bad apple. So if you have a CISO trying to reinvent the wheel, that's the wrong person to have in charge. But there's bad apples everywhere. But for the most part, all CISOs follow some sort of roadmap. In this case, I highly recommend the NIST cybersecurity framework. Some may follow just one set of standards, let's say like the 27,000 series, or maybe NERT, or whatever the standard might be. That's fine. You just pick one and you go for it. But you got to have a plan and you got to have a roadmap, because you can't just do everything all at once. And that's why I like the way Chris did this one with the years projected out. Because on top of implementing different security controls, you actually got to reevaluate these security controls annually. And it's an ongoing process. So let's take a look at the NIST cybersecurity controls right quick. This is why I like them. It boils down to 5 categories, okay? Now, these subcategories, I can change. That's no problem. I can tweak. I can modify them for my organization, because not everything applies, whether I'm at National, Varco, Halliburton, or at Alien Vault. Not every single category will apply to my organization, but those 5 categories do. And as long as I map my security controls to those 5 categories, I'm good to go. But let's go ahead and kind of zoom in on identity. And so what the U.S. government has done with the NIST document that's been published is they do a little bit of mapping already for you. So if you're like us, like Alien Vault right now, I've got a situation where I've got my corporate environment, but then I've got my production environment. My production environment has more security controls, obviously, because I want some more compliance standards, certifications, if you will, to my production environment than I do my corporate environment. Or obviously, since we're a private company, once we go public, or if we ever go public, then of course you got other controls that come into place. Let's say like Sarbanes-Oxley, and then there's a few others in there that can apply as well. But guess what? All of these security controls map up to those 5 controls, and it makes life so much easier. How many controls are there? There's a ton. There's a boatload of them out there. Fortunately, a lot of them overlap. A lot of language tweaks in there, because you may have one control in its particular standard that actually rolls up into 2 or 3 controls in some of these other documents. So it's kind of good to actually have this kind of mapping, if you will, back up. And I can't stress that enough, because the more I can have a map and kind of show my leadership, the better it is for me and to get my agenda that I want done. So it's security compliance. I tell you what, I've been at companies during the height of the Google hack, so I spent a lot of time in San Jose in the Valley. So there was 34 companies hacked. I was a Mandiant consultant, and they did compliance. They did compliance well, a lot of these companies, but it was hard for them because they didn't have any security controls in place. And I'll give you a really good security control: endpoint detection and response. Well, that's what Gartner calls it now, but back then we didn't have a name for it. We just needed some way to query the endpoint. And so Mandiant created this thing called MIR, Mandiant Intelligent Response, and that's what we use to go out and do our stuff. But my point is security, once we went in and we started going into all these companies, we quickly realized no one was doing any of the basic foundational security controls. And I'll show you some of those here in just a minute. If you do some of the basic cyber hygiene, the basic security controls, compliance is easy. You'll never have a problem in any compliance audit. Never. And cybersecurity is a journey. You can't get to there tomorrow. It's going to take a long time to get there. So where do we start? Luckily, I don't like reinventing the wheel, and it's already been done. The SANS Institute, if you're familiar with them, if not, it's sans.org. They did a phenomenal job. A bunch of people got together and created the SANS Top 20. It's since been tweaked. It's up to version 6.1, and here's the top 20 controls. Obviously, there's some sub-controls in there. The first 5 is what they call cyber hygiene, and cyber hygiene is critical to any organization. If you actually can fix and implement and reassess those first 5, you'll prevent 80% of the attacks that are out there just by doing those first 5. Now, here's the problem. When you get that telephone call from the FBI saying, oh, your network is communicating to some known APT group, you fill in the blank, North Korea, China, wherever, we always start with incident response. Oh, and number 20 is missing. It's penetration test. So we always start with incident response. That's where we start with in a lot of companies. So once we start at incident response, we quickly realize they don't even know what's on their network. So there's no inventory. So now we've got this network of, 10,000 unknown devices. And I'm not joking. We walk into organizations where they have no clue what this IP address or this host name equates to. So that was number 1. Number 2 is software. Is the PS exec tools authorized in your network? Yes or no? Do you even care? Well, if it is, there's a way to tweak it. You can sign it with your own code sign inserts, and that way you can alert on when PS exec is running that's not signed. So it's kind of a cool little way. That's just one example. Or do you allow uTorrent? You'll be surprised how many companies do. Secure configurations. This is a tough one, especially for large enterprises. It's very, very tough. In highly regulated industries, it's not tough. In industries like oil and gas, yeah, you'd think that, oh, yeah, you are regulated. No, well, kind of. In the safety world, oil and gas is regulated, but not in the cybersecurity world, we're not. So it's the secure configurations was always a tough one. You got guys that go out on rigs for 60 days at a time. So this idea of secure configurations and patch management and all this other mess just kind of gets thrown out the door, and you got to think differently. That's why I said about rolling up controls into those 5 categories, because you just think of a different control that can satisfy those needs. And of course, I'll skip vulnerability management. No one's figured it out yet. But there's a lot of cool tools out there for vulnerability scanning, but the actual vulnerability management program itself, no one's really kind of figured it out yet. But the control use of admin privileges, I can't stress this enough. If you're in a Windows environment, Microsoft has this thing called Red Forest. I highly encourage you to read up on it. It's a great way to separate your admin world from your user world. It is, my hat's off to Microsoft for for creating red forest. There's companies out there that's going to try and do hybrids red forest, but essentially what it is if I'm a domain administrator, I no longer log in as domain administrator. I log in as me, a normal user. My rights are the same as you in the network. If I got to do any type of admin work, I got to go check that account out for a certain amount of time for a certain particular procedure. I go and do it, and then I kick it right back in. And that's basically, essentially, very high level of what red forest is. I can't highly stress in an environment that's Windows, work for it. So now, if you're like Alien Vault, half your computers are Macs, half your computers are Windows, we don't have a domain, what do? Well, guess what? There's ways to do this. Google has done this phenomenal paper. It's a 3-part paper called Beyond Corp. I highly recommend reading it. It's about identity and device access, okay? There's a bunch of companies out there already starting up, trying to satisfy some of those needs, but it's essentially the same concept of this red forest, but it takes it out of the Microsoft world and puts it in the hands of other companies. But one company that comes to mind is Scale FT. They've got a pretty good product that kind of tackles this. So can't stress it enough. It's the future. Way to go. Because guess what? It's so easy to get domain admin on a large enterprise. It's very easy. I think in the Mandiant report, they said that within 3 days, every single pen test that they ever went on, they had domain admin access. It's that simple. I was at a organization, one of those oil and gas companies. I'm not going to name which one. We had, her name's Georgia, but I forget her last name. She wrote the book on pen testing. Weedman, there we go. We actually hired Georgia Weedman, wrote the book, literally wrote the book on pen testing. And we said, yeah, we know you can fish our organization, therefore you're going to establish that initial foothold. That's so easy in any organization. We know that. But what can you do once you get inside? So she shipped us her little Pony Express. Really, if you're into hardware, it's a really cool hardware device. Shipped us her little Pony Express. We hooked it up to our network, and we told her, okay, go. I'm not joking. By the end of the day, she was enterprise admin. By the end of the day. So there's domain admins, and then there's enterprise admins. So, you know, capture the flag, done. We're toast. She could do anything now. And that's where we started moving away from the concept of administrators can log in anywhere. That's what it boils down to. So we have controls. Now what? Well, that's what I talk about reassessing. From a CISO perspective, you got to know what your maturity level is, and you got to relay that what that maturity level is. Just because you got a team and you do this wonderful, cool stuff, let's say you got Carbon Black, Protect, Response, and what is it, Detect or Defend? I forgot the last product. Let's say you got all 3 of them in your network. So that means your maturity level on detection and protection from an endpoint perspective is way up there. You're very mature. But did you implement it right? Do you have the right rule sets in the product? Do you have the right coverage? What's the visibility look like? I'm strictly talking about endpoints here. Obviously, I could talk all day about the network. But from an endpoint perspective, that guy that went out there on that oil rig, does his computer have all the 3 tools that I just mentioned from an endpoint perspective? Is it being protected? Maybe you do have, let's say, a combination between an endpoint protection device, let's say like Carbon Black Protect, but then you got a network device called, the Zscaler agent. I forget what they call the agent. Maybe it is Zscaler agent, if anybody knows. But then they're like Cisco's umbrella, or AKA OpenDNS is what I still call them. So now you're protecting outbound traffic. But what if you have those 10,000 machines on your network and only 8,000 have that type of coverage on them? Now you got 2,000 machines running around on your network that it's almost like mind-boggling. People will go, oh, 80%, that's good, no problem. No, that's bad. It only takes the attacker once. Remember with Georgia? It's all she needs. So you always assess your maturity level, and you got to put visibility in that maturity level. So it's kind of cool. And obviously, the cool part is, and this is what I like about this particular slide, it's simple. When I show the leadership, I can say, we never want to be the Department of Defense. You know, we got to balance the controls and the costs and the risk and all that other mess. Okay? So we never are going to be the Department of Defense, of course, unless you have a production environment, you need to do some FedRAMP stuff. Then, of course, your production environment does look like the Department of Defense. But anyways, you know what I mean. So some takeaways here, but I kind of want to kind of throw this out there as well. So some takeaways about all this is the CISO's playbook is nothing more than a roadmap. And hopefully the CISO picked a security standard, let's say like the framework, NIST cybersecurity framework, and then maps all the controls to that. And it's nothing more than a balance. A CISO can come in an organization and go, we need to do application whitelisting. All right, well, one of the C-level executives can go, well, wait a minute, isn't that expensive? How many people does that take? We can't afford that, whether it's people, resources, money, whatever the case might be. So now from a CISO perspective, even though application whitelisting is known to stop all attacks, you just can't do it. You got to find other controls. Maybe now you turn it to detection and visibility versus protection. So it's just a balance for that culture in that organization and to see what you can and can't do. But you will be hacked. We will be hacked. You will have events. You will have incidences. And you will have breaches. And you have to be controlled and transparent as much as you can. The little quick story about transparency. Well, two small quick stories. Raytheon, I think it was China wanted to get into Raytheon. Couldn't get into it because they had multi-factor. They had all these security controls, and they were hammering away at Raytheon. Just couldn't get into them. So what do? Well, Raytheon's using the RSA token. Let's go hack the seed, and go get some seed keys. So that's exactly what they did. They went after RSA, stole the seed keys, and then now they're able to get into Raytheon and obtain their objectives. So from a security control perspective as a CISO, even though that they installed multi-factor and they did X, Y, and Z, you still got to be on your game about those third-party integrations that you do, like those tokens. Did you secure them right? Now, transparency. I'll tell you the best transparency story ever, and that's Bit9, aka Carbon Black now. So Carbon Black Protect is also known as Bit9, if you're not familiar with them. Years ago, they got attacked, and I forget which company the attacker group was after, but the attack group, probably China again, they're really good at it. They couldn't get into this company. They couldn't execute their files. So what does Bit9 do? It's application whitelisting. You can only run if you're signed or if you're whatever the rule. Depends on whatever rule that you write. Essentially, it's application whitelisting. So how do you bypass application whitelisting? Well, if you steal the signing cert from Bit9 themselves, guess what? You can do whatever you want to in their organization. That's exactly what happened. As soon as that happened, and I'm not joking, this is why I love Carbon Black, and I'm not here to promote anybody's product, but I do love them. Within 6 hours, we got a telephone call from the account executive. Hey guys, sorry, but we need you to block X, Y, and Z, in your product, and we'll issue a press release later. They actually called us before they did a press release. I love the transparency. We all know we're going to be breached. That's the bottom line. So we got to have that controlled response. That said, any questions? I guess I should have said y'all can stop me anytime, but I'm more than happy to talk about anything. You can have a copy of these slides if you want them. Yeah, that's it.
Path to becoming a CISO for people in the audience who might want to take that path, and why or why not would you recommend taking the path or not?
That's a really good question because I actually wanted to tell this small story. So if you read some language about CISOs, you'll see that probably, what was it, 4 or 5 years ago, CISOs kept getting fired. Lifespan of a CISO was only 2 years. Why is that? The CISOs that were being hired weren't really technologists. They were like accountants. They were bean counters. They weren't really true CISOs. They weren't really security leaders. So guess what? What does a bean counter do? They never implement security controls. They never have a roadmap. It's all about money to them. It's not about this balance of controls and risk. And yeah, I do have to deal with budgets and all that other mess. So from a career growth path, I started out as a computer crime investigator. You know, a police officer. I was busting doors down, catching bad guys. So you could start out as a coder, as a programmer. And as long as you pursue all avenues of security and understand the avenues, the different domains in security, I think you're set from a good career path, if that's what you want to do. Now, don't get me wrong. Being a CISO comes with all of the other paperwork nightmares of any type of executive in a company. So there's a lot of, if you're into people leadership, if you're into management of programs, CISO is a great path for you. If you just want to be a technical person, we're actually, I say we, there's a community of all of us are trying to fix that technical path for everybody. Just because you want to rise up in a company doesn't mean that you've got to stop at being a senior analyst or senior whatever. You know, let's graduate that career path. I think there's two different career paths now. There's a technical one, and then there's more of a administrative one, like a CISO. Any other questions? DevOps questions? I can answer AppSec stuff. Yes and no. You know, it's a really good question. Did everybody hear the question? Going to the cloud, does it change our role, right? Yeah. Okay. Going to the cloud, does it change our role? It's kind of cool, actually, that you mentioned that. National Well of Arc, so first of all, Halliburton hated the cloud, absolutely despised the cloud. Oil crash, guess what? We love the cloud now. Saves money, right? So we had to go, we're thinking, we, meaning IT security / CISO people, and I put myself back in the oil and gas business because that's kind of when the cloud explosion happened. So I put my technology hat on, and I'm like, cloud, it's this new thing, right? There's a meme out there. The cloud is just somebody else's computer. The same controls apply. It's just the ownership or the principles kind of shift a little bit. So if you have the cloud that I want to use, I'm going to start asking you, hey, do you have your SOC 2 Type 2 certification? You know, do you have any ISO standards that you follow? Are you on the path to some sort of compliance? Alien Vault, we stood up our cloud when I talked about that production environment. So that's exactly what we've done. So we know that if I use Amazon, I want to ask those same questions. Just like if you want to use Alien Vault, you're going to ask me those questions. It's a security review. So even though in the beginning, when I was in the oil and gas industry, we thought, oh, we got to go get cloud training. We got to do this. We quickly realized it's the same controls, whether you're on-prem or in the cloud. Just the shifts. Any other questions? DevOps. I can't believe no DevOps questions. Wow. All right. Well, good deal. Well, thank y'all very much. I'll have to start coming out here once a month then.
Okay. Thanks, everyone. Okay. Unfortunately, I don't have any giveaways for this meeting, so I need to see about getting some stuff for that. Anybody want to bring up anything else to the group before we adjourn? Okay, thanks everyone for coming.